Have you ever looked around your classroom or noticed the rules in your town and wondered, who actually came up with all this? To find out, we are going to travel back thousands of years to ancient India. We'll watch how people went from wandering in small groups to building some of the most highly organized empires in history. If we go all the way back to early human life, there were no cities, no borders, and definitely no money. People survived by hunting animals and gathering wild plants, moving constantly to find their next meal. Then, humans figured out how to plant seeds and grow their own food. Because crops take months to grow, people had to stop wandering and stay in one place. They built permanent villages. Once you have dozens of families living closely together in a permanent spot, you have to figure out how to share resources and settle arguments. That shift, from moving around to staying in one place, forced humans to invent rules and leaders just to survive. By about 1500 BCE, a time historians call the Early Vedic Period, people in India were living in these settled tribal groups called janas. Life in a jana was fairly simple and equal. If you look at this chart comparing how we measure wealth today against ancient times, you won't see coins or houses on the ancient side. You see cows. A family's status was measured entirely by how many cattle they owned. Within these early tribes, everyone had a voice. Women had equal access to education, wrote hymns, and sat in the main community assemblies to help make decisions for the group. Around 1000 BCE, as we enter the Later Vedic Period, someone pulled a new metal from the earth, iron, and iron changed the tools they could make. With iron axes, people cleared dense forests. With iron plows, they farmed deep, tough soil. Suddenly, farmers were growing far more food than they could eat. This extra food brought huge wealth, and the small tribes expanded rapidly. But that new wealth created a divide. Society split into a strict ranking called the Varna system. Instead of being valued for your skills, you were placed into one of 4 rigid social classes the moment you were born, and you couldn't move up. As these groups grew larger and more unequal, the old ways faded. Women lost their right to education and their seats in the public assemblies. The community leaders were replaced by kings who passed their power directly to their sons. The discovery of iron and better farming techniques allowed populations to boom and wealth to multiply. At the exact same time, it brought strict inequalities and rigid social classes that would define Indian society for centuries. As those iron-equipped tribes kept growing and merging, they turned into massive territories known as janapadas. Over time, these janapadas absorbed each other to form India's very first true empires. The most famous early example is the Mauryan Empire. When they took control, they believed the best way to rule millions of people with a strict, centralized grip. The Mauryan flowchart puts the king at the top with absolute control. Direct lines shoot to officials managing taxes, courts, and spies. In the Gupta Empire, these rigid lines dissolve into a flexible web. Kings shared power, handing authority to local village councils. Because local communities had freedom to make their own decisions, trade flourished and people felt secure. This flexible style of governing led to an era of massive economic and cultural growth. You can see the direct result of that booming economy when you look at this Gupta-era gold coin. The incredible detail in the metalwork and the royal imagery prove that the empire was rich, stable, and highly organized. The Mauryan and Gupta empires show us 2 totally different ways to run a massive state. Centralizing all power at the top creates strict order, while sharing power across local levels can spark a golden age of wealth and art. While kings were figuring out how to rule, regular students were figuring out how to learn. In ancient India, education happened in a system called the Gurukul. There were no tuition fees and hardly any written tests. Students lived with their guru. They learned through oral repetition and mastered discipline doing daily chores. Over centuries, those small local teachers' houses evolved into formal universities. Look at the scale of these red brick ruins at Nalanda University. It was a massive learning center that drew scholars from all over the world. The students studying here went far beyond basic reading and writing. They were tackling high-level medicine, complex philosophy, and advanced mathematics. Indian mathematicians from this era made discoveries we still use every single day. Scholars like Aryabhata worked out the rules of algebra, gave us the concept of zero, and figured out the Earth rotates on its own axis. All of this advanced knowledge trickled down to everyday workers. Highly skilled groups of artisans, called guilds, used these new advanced techniques to produce incredible textiles and metalwork, which they loaded onto ships and traded across the ocean. Ancient India certainly had powerful armies and massive borders, but the truest mark of their success was the advanced math, medicine, and highly crafted goods they exported to the rest of the human race. Which brings us all the way back to the present day, right back to the desk where you sit right now. Everything we rely on today has a starting point. The journey from small groups wandering the forests to the creation of farming, social classes, and massive empires created the structural blueprint for modern society. Those ancient Gurukuls represent an early realization that organized learning is vital for a community. The oceanic trade routes proved the world could be connected through commerce, and the early village assemblies showed that local participation has always been a powerful way to manage a society. History is a living record of human beings constantly testing different ways to live together. Every system we have now, from our schools to our governments, is a legacy of those early experiments. So the next time you sit in class or learn a new rule, remember that you are participating in a story of human development that has been running for thousands of years. You are just the newest level.